On this Thursday night, Donald Trump face-to-face with a federal judge again.
This is a very sad day for America.
The former U.S. president's plea on criminal charges he conspired to steal the 2020 election. His possible trial date. Exhausted, risking their lives, and grieving.
You're pushing the limits of what humans can do.
What these crews are fighting beyond BC's wildfires. Vehicle shoppers forced to hit the brakes, what's driving up prices and depleting inventory.
Global National with Dawna Friesen.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington, D.C., arrested and arraigned for a third time, an unprecedented moment in American history. Cameras not allowed inside the courthouse today as Trump pleaded not guilty to charges he conspired to defraud the U.S. and cling to power. Good evening and thanks for joining us. There have been so many unimaginable firsts, so many lines crossed since Trump first ran for president that it's hard to keep track of them. But this is the most significant and serious legal case against him. Prosecutors allege he knew he'd lost the 2020 election and yet was part of a scheme to try to overturn the results. Jackson Proskow is outside the courthouse. Jackson, take us through what happened.
Well, Donna, this is becoming a bit of a well-rehearsed routine for the former president. He leaves his home, he flies to another city for a brief court appearance, and that's exactly what happened today. Trump appeared in Washington, D.C. for a very procedural court hearing. Entering that not guilty plea, he was seated about 5 meters away from special counsel Jack Smith, and we understand the two did make brief eye contact during that hearing. The former president was given a list of release restrictions. They include not discussing the case with witnesses. If he violates those conditions, he could find his bail revoked effectively here, Donna. Really, though, the former president, as he left the courtroom, made it clear he is defiant and he is chalking this up to what he calls political persecution.
This is a very sad day for America. This is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America.
Jackson, lots of hyperbole there. I think Trump and Biden, the polls show, are actually neck and neck. Trump is running to be president again, though. Is the trial likely to happen before or after the 2024 election?
Well, this is where things are going to get interesting. The next hearing in this court case is just in a couple of weeks from now, and that's where they're going to lay out the trial schedule. And special counsel Jack Smith has made it clear he wants a speedy trial, perhaps one starting within the next 90 days. Trump's defense team, though, wants the exact opposite. They want to kick the can down the road as far as possible. They want this dealt with after the 2024 election, believing that Trump can win and that a Trump-led Justice Department can effectively disappear the charges. Where this ends up is a big question right now. And the other thing we have to keep in mind here, Donna, is that Trump's schedule is pretty packed with court hearings over the next year or so between this indictment, the other federal charges in the documents case, the New York case, and the looming indictment in Georgia. Somewhere in the middle of all that, he's going to try and run a presidential campaign.
All right, Jackson Proskow in Washington, thank you. Now to the wildfires in Canada. More than 1,000 active fires are burning, about a third of them in BC. Among those being closely watched are the Downton Lake fire. It's 110 kilometers northwest of Whistler. Fire officials say at least 5 structures have been lost in the Gun Lake area. More than 200 properties were issued evacuation orders on Tuesday. And in south central BC, the Lower East Adams Lake fire is burning northeast of Kamloops, while the Ross Moor Lake fire is burning south of that city. Our Neetu Garcha got access to crews doing dangerous work there. Neetu.
Dawna, BC crews have a lot to think about under increasingly hot, dry and windy conditions. But what's at the forefront for many of those here on the front line is the firefighters who've lost their lives this season while doing the same job they are.
Check, we just departed fire 202.
From the air, you can see how this out-of-control wildfire about 10 kilometers away from Kamloops, BC, has jumped containment lines and moved fast due to changing winds.
You're pushing the limits of what humans can do in this job a lot of the time, whether physically, emotionally, or intellectually. Just the amount you have to manage at any given moment, the situations you have to be part of.
Aus Al-Mubarak is a task force leader. He says hearing a 25-year-old firefighter was killed battling fires in BC over the weekend, the fourth to die in Canada this season, has taken a toll on everyone.
For it being the fourth, it definitely hit us hard.
Crew safety is also top of mind for Simone Bermudez, who's cutting down dangerous trees in their way.
There is inherent risk, always. We understand that. And when something like this happens, like the death, unfortunately, that occurred this year, everybody feels it. You know, a red shirt's a red shirt.
Our BC crews are spread out far and wide.
Former fire investigator Adam Buchanan says trees like this one, burnt only on one side, help determine which direction the fire traveled.
The fire progressed this way, took a good run on the first day. It burnt all the roots, and if we get down, we can see this goes for a long, long way. We can't just spray water on the top, and this could still be burning 10, 12, 15 feet down any one of these roots that we're looking at.
All signs of how dry the fuels are.
We have consistently seen busy fire seasons, and I think it's just getting used to that and knowing what we're getting into each year with the climate.
It's been a long summer, and there's moments where I'm tired and I just want it to be winter again.
From what I've seen this week, there isn't a BC firefighter here who isn't exhausted. The service has been stretched thin since April, and with August ahead of us, they're urging everyone to do their part to prevent any human-caused fires. Dawna?
All right, Neetu Garcha near Kamloops, BC. Thanks. In China, it's flooding that's the danger. That car plunged off a collapsed bridge in northern China. The driver was rescued by other motorists. Parts of the country are dealing with flash flooding triggered by torrential rains from Typhoon Doksuri. Emergency crews are still scrambling to rescue people who were stranded by the floodwater. At least 22 people are known to have died, and that number is expected to rise. More than 1.2 million people have been moved to safety. Mike Armstrong on China's unprecedented floods.
It is one of those statistics that's hard to believe. This city, southwest of Beijing, was hit by a year's worth of precipitation in one single rainfall. It's been volunteers going building to building, helping people escape. This woman had been stuck for 4 days and says she barely slept. She was too afraid her home would collapse. According to the Chinese state broadcaster, tens of thousands of people have been trapped in their homes. There have also been landslides and flash floods that have cut off some areas. Crews in multiple provinces are trying to clear roads. The typhoon has now been downgraded to a tropical storm. It's moved northeast and rains have tapered off. But what has been left is a region about 3 times the size of New Brunswick, struggling with what comes next. Waterways and reservoirs are over capacity, and authorities are trying to find ways to discharge some of that water safely. This man says his family lost their entire crop and there was nothing they could do. Now, another logistical problem has been with rescue crews. Teams were being brought in from other areas to help. That has now stopped. According to reports, there was overcrowding on access routes, and coordination was turning into a safety issue. The rescue crews that are working have been busy around the clock. Residents are waiting for us to save them, this man says. We have to grasp every minute to save as many as possible. Now, these are being called the worst floods since 1996. In that year, 2,800 people were killed. New flood control systems were brought in after that flooding. They are being tested this week, as are rescue crews. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
Demands to search a Winnipeg area landfill site for the bodies of 2 First Nations women are ramping up. Today there was a show of solidarity at Winnipeg's busy Portage and Main intersection. Demonstrators created a giant red dress at the intersection, a symbol for missing and murdered Indigenous women. Winnipeg police have said a search is not feasible. The Manitoba government says it will not support a search of the privately owned Prairie Green landfill because it could expose searchers to toxic chemicals. Protesters recently blocked the entrance to another Winnipeg landfill for nearly 2 weeks before police removed that blockade. It's not certain whether we're headed for a recession in Canada. Economists take different views on that. What is certain is that summer travel is in full swing and people are spending. But there is some unease about what's being called a rich recession. And as Anne Gaviola explains, the impact depends on your income bracket.
You probably can't tell because travel demand is back with a vengeance and luxury goods sales are robust. But Canada may be heading towards a different kind of economic downturn.
A so-called rich recession is an economic downturn that primarily affects the wealthy. It is the opposite of a typical recession, which hits lower income people the most.
The first signs may be tech layoffs, which have already claimed many high-paying jobs. Some economists predict pay cuts for the highest earners and a pay bump for the lowest.
Lower wage workers, blue-collar workers, gaining higher wages, getting more power, thanks to the labor shortages, while we're seeing higher paid workers maybe not gaining as much.
An uptick in labor unrest may be one sign of this financial recalibration. This labor studies professor says it's viewed by frontline workers as a long overdue redistribution of wealth.
Workers have seen their real wages, their purchasing power eroding a great deal under this inflationary period. And yet, large corporations have made record gains.
What has happened throughout the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, especially through the Great Recession, was that we saw the middle class sort of disappearing.
Many analysts say we're already in a so-called rolling recession, where the economy is dragged down by floundering sectors like tech, but boosted by a strong housing market, energy industry, and the return of travel. As for the wealthy,
these higher income households were very well off to begin with, so they had more savings, they could tap into that to weather the storm.
Well, they may finally feel the pinch of a recession, but they're well equipped to get through it. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Major roadblocks for car buyers. Coming up, what's fueling high prices and low supply? Any hopes of Alberta hosting the 2030 Commonwealth Games have been dashed. The provincial government has pulled its support for a bid. It was going to be a joint bid, a partnership with the cities of Edmonton and Calgary, two First Nations, the federal government and the province. The province cites financial feasibility concerns as the reason for withdrawing support. Edmonton last hosted the Commonwealth Games in 1978. Buying a car has become more of a challenge as Canada's automotive industry steers out of a pandemic pothole. Historically low inventories of both new and used vehicles have pushed prices higher than ever, and buyers have to wait months or years for their wheels if they can even find a vehicle. Turia Izri explains.
Stefan Takis put a deposit down for a Toyota Sienna a year and a half ago.
It's been a little frustrating.
His family needs a bigger vehicle. He has 3 children, including a son with cerebral palsy.
He's small enough now I can still pick him up, but eventually we'll need probably one of those Siennas with the adapted accessibility.
Takis has no idea if or when it will arrive. Jenny Alton has spent 8 months looking for something basic, but can't find anything in her budget.
Well, I'm not looking to spend $45,000 on a car that I'm going to put 30,000 K on and go back and forth to work with. I need something to haul my lunch bag.
According to Auto Trader, the average price of a new vehicle in Canada is now $62,000.
Vehicle prices for new vehicles that are about 60% higher at the retail level relative to pre-pandemic.
Price can be an obstacle, and so can supply. This may seem like a lot of vehicles on the lot, but in reality, most of them are already sold or spoken for, while some bestsellers are nowhere to be found. This dealership is completely out of stock of the Ford Escape.
Pre-pandemic, this lot would have 3 to 4 rows of full F-150s. Plus
it's not only new cars selling out.
The cost of a used Civic has probably never been higher because the demand for both new and used now because you can't get them.
Economists say supply chain issues, complicated most recently by the BC port strike, are contributing in part to the shortage.
I don't believe we'll go back to 2019 prices, and the reason why is just that cars are more expensive to make overall.
Electric vehicles are especially expensive. Automakers have also prioritized making more high-end vehicles where the profit margins are bigger. Takis doesn't want anything fancy.
Sure, we can buy, something that's definitely less efficient, but nowadays everything's so expensive.
A big ticket item that's become even bigger and harder to get in these challenging economic times. Taria Isri, Global News, Ottawa.
Dispute disruption still ahead, how the strike of Hollywood actors and writers is affecting productions in Canada. American pop star Lizzo says allegations made in a lawsuit by 3 of her former dancers are sensationalized stories. The Grammy winner, known for promoting body positivity, denies the allegations. They include sexual harassment, false imprisonment, racism, and dancers saying they've been body shamed. In a statement, the singer calls that too outrageous to not be addressed. She says it's never her intention to make employees feel uncomfortable or like they aren't valued. The plaintiffs also allege Lizzo pressured them to attend sex shows and touch naked performance, and say they were once forced to attend an excruciating 12-hour audition. Well, there is some signs of hope in the strike by writers in the U.S. film and television industry. After months of picketing, they'll be back at the negotiating table with major studios on Friday. Actors are on strike too, though. And as this job action impacts Canada's entertainment industry, it's prompting this country's film and TV workers to think about their own deals. Mike Drolet reports.
213, take 2. If it's a Canadian movie or TV show,
and action.
They're still yelling action. Any show with an American actor or writer has had to hit pause, putting Hollywood North in a deep freeze.
Vancouver was hit very hard. That's the largest U.S. location in Canada.
What do we want? The strike involves U.S. writers and actors. So far, Canada's version could be just around the corner.
Our negotiations come up in 2024, so we're watching this really closely. Their fight is our fight. Their issues are our issues, and we'll be continuing that fight when it's our turn to get back to the table.
The hope is that the American unions get a deal that's transferable, but that's no sure thing. The complicated compensation issues around streaming services are one thing, but those pale in comparison to the new technology on the block, artificial intelligence, which has seemingly limitless potential to disrupt the industry. It's why the unions are going back to school.
We're in conversation now with some academics from Stanford and MIT. We're looking to bring in some high-powered academics. You got to know the enemy before you go to the table.
Actors, for one, fear studios could have them on set one day and then use their likeness over and over without paying them.
If we are allowing AI to produce itself at such a rapid pace, it trickles down into so many areas in life that just becomes unethical and immoral all around.
Hollywood has had to adapt before. The switch from film to videotape and now digital wasn't easy, but producing deals that maintain and reward the human element in the computer age could be the hardest script to write yet. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Tonight's Your Canada is Carcross, Yukon. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to us. And thanks for watching. Chris Galis will be at the anchor desk tomorrow. Bye-bye.